We are Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak, and we are gearing up for Saints organized team activities to kick off this week. We'll be out there in full force. Can't wait to check out, I guess, the first thing on the list, get your roster and start doing attendance.
Woo!
Right.
Super exciting. Pardon my appearance. I'm a little worn out. I went to a Taking Back Sunday concert yesterday, so my 14-year-old emo me is like having a great day. But I don't know. Maybe we have one like 33-year-old, former emo kid who can appreciate that was an important thing for me to see Taking Back Sunday live. Anyway, so now adult you has to get up and do podcasts. Yeah, so like this is that was my taking advantage of like the one slow week of this month, and now it's going to be OTAs mini camp, and then we get basically the month of June off. But we're going to figure it out either way. Not the whole month of June, like the end of June. Yeah. That's the break between mini camp and training camp, which will be kind of caught up by trying to figure out how we're going to get the hell out to Irvine and what we're going to do there. But yeah, so this first segment, I do want to talk about OTAs. The open portion of the practice is on Tuesday, and then I believe it goes Wednesday and Thursday are the practices. And we're going to get one per week, the next week, the following week, until we're out there for the entirety of mandatory mini camp. So all that is to say, we're not going to know exactly what goes on the days we're not out there. So we're going to take attendance, and we're just going to assume that whoever's not there on Tuesday will not be there on Wednesday and Thursday. We're also not going to dive into a ton in terms of predictions or what we're looking for, because our next episode is going to be breaking down what we saw out there. So we'll just talk about it for this first segment and go on. Second segment, I want to talk about Scott Shanle, former Saints linebacker. Had some interesting comments on Derek Carr. We posted him on the YouTube channel. It's got like 300 comments on it. Everyone's feeling some type of way about it. So I figured we could just talk about it, kind of break down how we feel about it, that sort of thing. And then final segment, I want to go over the schedule predictions. I want to get your schedule prediction. We haven't yet. Talk about Mike Detillier's schedule prediction, Bobby Hebert's. But let's come back to it. OTAs, right? So the biggest question for OTAs every year, who shows up? They are not mandatory. Right. If you're not there, it is allowed, right? Let's get that out of the way. Someone not being there is not like, oh my God, like just, it's fine. I would say though, like for something like Derek Carr not to be there when a new offense is getting put in would be kind of jarring. I would expect the entire offense to be there, barring some, like if there's a good reason, like it's like I cannot make it, like that's fine. But like I expect a vast majority of the offense to be there because it's a new offense, and missing this opportunity is, you better have a good reason, because if you show up week one and you're the step behind, well, it's like, well, what the hell? Like you didn't, you had an opportunity to start earlier and you didn't. So anyway, I think Cam Jordan said 90% was the attendance that we're expecting. Is Cam, Cesar Ruiz, Dennis Allen, Mickey Loomis all spoke at Saints Hall of Fame golf event on Monday morning. So we're going to play clips from that, kind of get into the OTAs conversation. But yeah, 90% makes sense. And I would expect a handful of the absences to be on the defensive side. Guys I don't expect to be there. Marshon Lattimore, which we'll talk about Marshon Lattimore in a second. Yeah, D.I. addressed that. I do not expect Marshon Lattimore to be there. I kind of don't expect Demario Davis to be there. Right. And, there could be a couple others, like Cam Jordan's obviously going to be there, but I don't know if he's going to be working because he's still dealing with the ankle injury. He hasn't been cleared for running yet. So I don't think he's going to be in the drills. He'll be doing walkthroughs. He'll be out there. Right. But I would be surprised to see him involved in that. Chase Young is another guy who will not be working, but I believe he will be there. Then you have the rookies, which is Jalen Ford, who is dealing with, I want to say, a sports hernia surgery. He's recovering from that. And then Josiah Ezerim, who had an injury, but it's expected to be minor. Kool-Aid McKinstry also don't expect to be working because he's coming back from that foot injury. But again, I expect him to be there. So I don't know what, in terms of the 90% attendance, I imagine that's like, I'd say if you're in the building, you're at OTAs because you're doing some kind of team work there. Yeah, and you're doing walkthroughs and stuff. So I think you were considered to be there if you were just there, right? I think the 90% attendance it counts the people who are not on the field working, but are there getting rehab done. So, it's tough to name, maybe some of the veteran linemen, right? Like maybe an Eric McCoy, although Eric, his belief system is like, if the quarterback's there, I'm there. So he probably will be there. Cesar Ruiz is in town, so he's there. But we'll see. I mean, I expect that's going to be, a handful of guys who, and a lot of times it's family related. It's like, I got like kids, I can't, like I have to deal with this. I'll be there eventually. So we'll see. But I do expect any of the guys on rookie contracts and most of the offensive players to be there.
Yeah, you mentioned Marshon. Man, I'm hoping he is, but I'm with that theory too, that I don't think he'll be out there. But it would make quite a statement all of a sudden. You see Lattimore with the team out in OTAs. It's like there's no problems here, folks.
It would send a positive message. And we did hear from Dennis Allen on Marshon Lattimore and kind of the latest there. Didn't say much, but here's that.
I had a conversation with him probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. I thought it was a positive conversation. And so, we're moving forward.
And I mean, I don't know. You could overreact to that and say like, oh yeah, everything's great. I don't know. I guess the head coach talking to Marshon Lattimore is a good thing.
Right. It's not like, oh, I couldn't tell you. I haven't spoken to him in a couple months.
It would be a bad look if DA went out there and was like, I have no idea. I haven't talked to him since the end of last season. Right.
If he's there tomorrow, we'll talk.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a good thing. Like they're in communication. I think they want to keep him around. I think it's a situation where, and I know Mickey did an interview on XM recently where he was like, we're not actively trying to trade Marshon. Everyone's tradable. And I think that's where you are. It's like, hey, if someone comes in and makes an offer that's like worthwhile and you can, the return is actually reasonable. Yeah, you could trade him, but you're not, you again, I've said this so many times by now that I'm just a broken record. You need to make sure you are not in a situation where you cannot keep Marshon Lattimore on the roster, even if the trade is not there. So we're going to find out over the next few months whether that's the case or not, right? If he holds out or doesn't show up in minicamp, now it's really expensive for players to hold out now with the new CBA. So I expect him to be there. But like if he does something like CJ did, where CJ is obviously the comparison you're going to make because CJ. It's still so funny, like how that all worked out.
Oh, it was disgusting.
Like the thing that everyone, the thing that really stands out in my mind was when he started minicamp, or I can't remember. He got a pick six off Jameis, like the first play, and then ran into the cooling trailer, and then just didn't come back.
Right.
And like that was like the start of everyone's like, okay, this is gonna end poorly. Right. So we'll see. But for now, it sounds like things are on the right track. Chase Young, another guy. It sounds like, again, things are on the right track, although we just don't know right now. And this is what Dennis Allen had to say about Chase Young.
The procedure with him.
Look, things are going well right now. Look, I don't expect to see him out there on the practice field, working anytime soon. He's been able to participate in some of the walkthrough stuff that we've had. I think that'll be the mode that he's going to be in for, the majority of, this time of year. And then we'll see where we're at when training camp comes around.
Yeah. And Cam talked about it too. Cam kind of, said if he thinks he's in a good headspace, right? And that's kind of where you're at right now. He's doing rehab. He's getting back. The expectation was that he was not going to be ready until training camp and possibly not right away in training camp. So that's kind of what we're looking at now is, what is that ramp up and when can he be ready? Ideally for day one of camp. If he can be ready for day one of camp, that's a win. Because if anyone doesn't recall, he dealt with a stinger in his neck during last season. It's a nerve issue. I'm not going to get into the medical part of it because I don't want to. I'm not a doctor, but it's a nerve issue. He had it in his neck, and that impacted his trade value last year. It impacted his stock in free agency, and whatever team signed him was going to have to accept the fact that he was not going to pass a physical and he was going to have surgery. And the Saints were that team. And, I think it makes sense. Like it's a very low risk, high reward play. This is a guy who was the rookie of the year a couple years ago. He was the number 2, 3 pick in the draft, right? Like there's a lot of talent there and he's got an incentive to prove it.
I'm definitely anxious to see what Chase Young can bring. This was a guy last year too. I'm guessing before the injury, with Washington, I think it was 7 sacks in 5 games, something like that.
Yeah, he was productive dealing with that injury. So, you'd like to think, hey, if he gets that sorted out, he can be even more productive. But we'll see. Either way, don't expect to see him out there. Cesar Ruiz is a guy I expect to see out there. He's slimmed down a little bit. He's down to 315. I like Cesar. I one of the things that I'm eager to see in this new offense is how can he be utilized? Like, I don't think people realize he's a very good athlete at his size. He moves very well. I just, I think at times the blocking schemes were a little archaic for the Saints and how they wanted to operate. And, I think this scheme where he's going to be able to get in the move a little more often is going to suit him well. And we'll see. But here's a clip of Cesar talking about the new offensive line coach, John Benton. And one part stands out in particular.
Yeah. I love JB. Great coach. Great coach, great guy. He's great, like I said, great for the room. The young guys respond well to him. I respond well to him. And, obviously he's been around for a while. He knows his stuff. So, great coach.
All right. And yeah, so if you're wondering what part I was referring to, it's when he says the young guys respond well to him. And I think that's important. I think that is what you were really looking for when you changed the offensive line coach, right? Because you kept Jory Evans, right? You didn't change everything. But you changed the top end coach. And I think you did that because you need the young offensive linemen to develop. And you were not getting that with Doug Marrone, specifically Trevor Penning. And the fascinating question, and we're going to, this episode is going to post in the morning. We'll know the answer by the afternoon. Is Trevor lining up at left tackle? Is Taliesin Fuanga lining up at left tackle? I would expect Trevor to be there and Taliesin to be at right tackle. That doesn't mean anything per se, but it would be a really rough look if the first day of camp practice, of mini OTA practice, you don't have Trevor at left tackle. Because you would think they're going to at least give him the chance there. So I expect him to be at left tackle, and now we won't be out there on Wednesday or Thursday to know whether they switch. Because a lot of times that's what you'll see. Like when Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor were competing for the CB2 job, they would alternate. So you wouldn't really know who was ahead because one day it was one guy, one day it was the other guy. But either way, like John Benton, I need to see him develop these young players. And if he can do that, hero. If he can't, then Saints are in trouble.
Left tackle, definitely not the only spot. Just interesting to see how things all around line up on that offensive line. Obviously, one of the dudes we mentioned not expecting to see is Ryan Ramczyk, as he's still dealing with that knee issue.
He won't be out there. Yeah. So you're talking about 90% attendance. He's not going to be there.
Right.
He might be rehabbing, but I don't think that he'll be doing it here. But we'll see. Either way, yeah. I mean, you're going to be looking for someone at right tackle. So if it's not Fuanga at right tackle, who's it going to be? Is the question. And so I think the answer will be Fuanga, but we'll go from there.
To me, I just know center and right guard, and that's really it.
Yeah, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, and that kind of leads in. So another thing Mickey Loomis talked about, Andres Pete. Let's hear that clip.
But as an example, Andres Pete stands out as a guy who would have been a nice safety net.
Yeah.
He's played guard and tackle for you, backup quarterback position. You didn't spend a lot of money. I mean, were there areas where, look, we're going to have to go with some young players with some depth as opposed to wanting to resist that urge to spend $4 or $5 million on a guy who kind of plugs an immediate hole?
Well, look, I think that depends upon the circumstance. Do you have, guys on your roster that you feel comfortable can step up into those roles, or do you feel like you don't? And if you don't, you're going to need to go get those types of guys. And Andres is a good example. We made attempts to get him re-signed, and he chose to go someplace else, which that's what free agency is about. And look, Andres was a good pick for us and played for us for a long time. Excited for him. I know he's got a new chapter. He's probably excited about a new team, and wish him nothing but the best of luck.
Yeah, and so this is kind of something I wouldn't take that from Mickey as anything like, oh my God, they desperately tried to get Andres Pete back and they didn't. I think what happened is you tried to get him back on like a veteran minimum contract, and he was like, no. And he tested his market. I don't think his market was what he hoped it would be.
Exactly.
Like we saw his season. We're like, oh, he probably has a much bigger market this year than he did previously. And I mean, based on the amount of time it took and where he landed, I mean, he took a visit to the Titans. They didn't sign him. So who knows? But he said, Mickey said the same thing about Marcus Davenport, said the same thing about David Onyemata. I think it's kind of, and we also don't know when they tried to re-sign him, if it was prior to the dead cap hit or if it was whatever, which that would have been a restructure. Either way, Andres Pete is with the Raiders now. And the reason,
pretty much with all those guys, it's we want you back on our number. And that's
exactly,
it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know what he signed to with the Raiders. Let's see. No, we haven't seen any numbers reported. I'm sure it wasn't a big deal. You know, I think part of it was like, hey, I want to go do something else.
For sure, right. I could use a change of scenery myself, right?
Yeah, and so that's where you are. But so the Saints brought in Lucas Patrick, and you know, I don't know a ton about Lucas Patrick, but a team that does know a little bit about Lucas Patrick is the Saints, because they faced him last year with the Bears. And you know, I think that we underestimate, as we kind of look at like, oh, why'd they sign this guy? Why'd they sign that guy? A lot of times it's because, hey, we got a really good look at him. And one thing Dennis Allen said was that when they signed him, Brian Brzee was like, oh yeah, this guy, when we faced him last year, you know, he was a load. Like, I had a really difficult time matching up with him. He's just battling on every possession, every snap, right? And Mike Detillier is a big fan of Lucas. Like, he thinks he thinks that's the starting left guard for.
Yeah, that was strong for Mike.
Yeah, and here's a clip from Mike talking about that.
The agent, solid football player, good technician, University of Duke guy, so he's been well coached there. I think he's a better run blocker than he is a pass protector, and having watched him throughout the years, 30 years old, he has started 54 games in the NFL with both the Packers and the Bears. Now, over the last 4 years, he has started 48 games at both center and guard, and 15 games last year with the Chicago Bears. What I look at this is that they're bringing him in to see if he can take over the left guard spot. And he has played both left guard, right guard, center. I think this spot here is for Lucas Patrick to take over that left guard position to handle it again. He has started 48 games the last 4 years. In the games he didn't start, he was out because of a toe injury. So Patrick, kind of seasoned veteran here, being brought in to, I think, piece together that left guard position that is wide open at this stage.
So, yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot about, okay, who's the starting left tackle? I'm sorry, who's the starting left guard? Who's the starting left guard? Maybe it's Lucas Patrick, and we'll see. I mean, I guarantee he's going to be there on Tuesday. I mean, he might be. It'll be interesting to see how the rotation stacks up. Like, who's with the ones, who's with the twos. But no, I think Mike's right. I think right now, based on what we know, Lucas Patrick is probably at the top of that depth chart. You also have Shane Lemieux. I'd like to see Nick Saldiveri show something.
I was going to mention him. Yeah, obviously a draft pick from last year, hoping can make some kind of progress from a year ago. And I know he was banged up.
Yeah. And Nick, I guess he was hurt early on. I don't know how much that affected him, but I also, you also don't know, okay, who's your backup center? Who's your backup right guard? Shane Lemieux, like a lot of these guys can play all three spots. And so that's the benefit of having, like, Lucas Patrick has played the bulk of his snaps at center. Shane Lemieux has played the bulk of his snaps at center, but you imagine they could play guard, right? The same way Cesar Ruiz came up as a guard and came up as a center and is now a guard. So you don't necessarily need a backup right guard, a backup left guard, a backup center if you have one guy who can do all three, or you have two guys who can do all three, and you feel comfortable.
Shout out to James Hurst. Enjoy your retirement. We'll miss your versatility.
Right. Speaking of a guy who could do a little bit of everything, that's why he was in the league as long as he was.
Right.
So we'll see. And so you might see one or more of these guys lining up at left guard than lining up at right guard. I honestly would expect it. But those are going to be, we're not going to talk about position battles right now, because we're not going to be able to see. Yeah, well, that, and we're also not going to be able to see enough in the one day where we can actually make a determination on position.
Oh, we got the starting offensive line.
Right. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I can make that interpretation. It's really not something you can start getting into until mini camp and full training camp. But the left guard spot is one that you're going to want to watch, and you're going to want to watch it closely, because you genuinely don't know who the starter is going to be, but Lucas Patrick might be that guy. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. We're going to come back, talk about Scott Shanle's take on Derek Carr. Whether people are being a little unreasonable with how they assess Derek Carr and kind of their hardline takes on Derek Carr. When that includes, his contract. We'll talk about that. But yeah, we'll get into it. We're also going to talk about schedule predictions and where some people are landing and why. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. It's the offseason. We're still talking about it. There's really no offseason in the NFL, right? Like, it's just different.
There'll be that lull right before training camp. I feel like that's the at least from our perspective of the least amount to talk about. It's like, all right, now what?
Yeah, really. You talk about like, okay, I get asked from people. It's like, what do you do after the season ends? And like, realistically, other than like the second half of June, there's always something from the NFL perspective.
Feels like it, right?
It's never like done. Either you're talking about the draft, you're talking about the combine, you're talking about free agency, you're talking about OTAs, right? Talking about rookie minicamp. And then like once you get done with mandatory minicamp, there's like a couple weeks.
Right.
And then the other thing is like bye weeks, right? Like that's why you have to disappear during bye weeks, because that's like actually a vacation, or like the fourth preseason week. That's one of the few changes the NFL made that I appreciate, is that the off week in between.
No breather.
Yeah, because it kind of lets you reset before the actual season starts. Because like I said, like there's really no reset time. Like we just go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, then all of a sudden it's the next season. But one thing that speaking of things we don't get a break from, and I'm Jeff Nowak, he's Steve Geller, is, man, people don't like Derek Carr.
And you got to appreciate him even poking fun of it and acknowledging it with the Saints schedule release.
Yeah, well, yeah, we should mention the Saints schedule release video because I thought it was fantastic. I think those guys do a great job. I appreciate, like there are people put out rankings like, oh, who had the best video, and they're never going to be at the top because I think they want to make it local. They want to make it resonate with Saints fans and Louisiana people, and they're going to put Margaret Orr in there, and someone from Buffalo is going to be like, who the heck is
hell's that, right? And
someone from New Orleans is going to be like, it's going to be like the Leo meme, right?
Yeah.
And they had Mickey chewing the gum, right? Like again, like people locally are going to be like all over that, whereas someone else will be like, what's going on? But it's funny when you can get like I wasn't sure if Mickey was in on that joke or not. Genuinely, like I wasn't sure if maybe
we had to have heard it afterwards from everybody. Even McAfee talked about it.
Well, right, but like I wasn't sure if maybe he didn't. He's not on Twitter. He's not seeing a lot of that stuff.
Or is he?
He might be getting told that stuff.
Exactly.
So I wasn't. You don't know, but yeah, he did the whole gum chewing bit in that commercial. But the funniest one was Derek Carr. And here, let me cut that out, and I'll plug it in right here so you can get the picture we're talking about.
What makes you the perfect fit for this role?
I don't know. I feel like people on Twitter just get me.
Yeah. So the people on Twitter, I think they just get me. And yeah, and I mean, like that's the thing. And I do think it's interesting. Like you're talking about Derek Carr, and there's just this like visceral reaction to anything he says, anything he does. There's just this huge portion of the fan base that just hates it with a passion. And I'm not sure I get it. Like I get being frustrated at a quarterback.
Right.
But I don't get like this idea that it's like all or nothing. It's like shoot him out of a cannon because it didn't go perfectly in year one. And there's a lot to it, but I think Scott Shanle talked to Bobby Hebert on WWL last week, and I thought he broke it down pretty well and just kind of hit on a few key points that we can kind of discuss after we listen to it. So let's play that right here, and we'll be right back.
But when I look at, don't you think fans are right now like kind of 50-50 on Derek Carr? And I think that's why he cannot afford that he has to get off to a fast start. And what I mean by that, okay, let me. This is winning football. What he did to end the season, and if you look at this, the Saints close out the season 4-2. Okay, I'm looking at their schedule. I think the Saints will close out the season very similar this year. Just looking at, I'm thinking like, okay, if you worth your salt, Giants, I don't know, Commanders, Raiders, you got to beat those kind of teams. But I'm looking at the Saints close the season 4-2, and Derek Carr was playing his best football. Now, you got to transfer that now to September, the beginning of the year. Do you know he completed 74.5, not 71, 72, 74.5% of his passes in that stretch in 6 games? That was number 1 in the NFL. Okay?
Yep.
And if you look at it, he had 15 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Well, hell yeah, if he does that, that's going to give us a chance. So just looking, I think this is the season. And you look at Derek Carr and where you at as a quarterback in your career, that how you finished the season, the last 6 games, man, that's amongst the best in the whole league. Well, that's what we need come this September from Derek Carr.
Yeah, there's no question. And you said some of the fan base is 50-50. I don't even know if it's that high, and I think it should be. It should be more because I was just going to rattle off the stats you did. Derek really finished the season great. Now, my thing with Derek is I was excited about the acquisition. I thought he was kind of the missing piece of the puzzle. I thought we'd win the AFC South. He was banged up, didn't play well. I was a little down on some of the leadership things, maybe some of the things he said after the games, as far as taking the responsibility and not. And then he finished the season extremely strong and looked really good and looked like the Derek Carr that everybody kind of thought we were getting. Now, the only thing I ask of the fans is if you're going to criticize, you got to give him credit. And I don't feel like people gave him enough credit at the end of the year for the way he played because there was tons of criticism. I still listen to it now. We draft a guy in the 5th round, and everybody wants him to be the starter. I'm like, listen, there's a reason.
You've heard it. You've heard it.
Yes. I mean, it is so strong that I'm like, okay, maybe if Spencer Rattler becomes the starting quarterback for the Saints someday, heck yeah, that's a dynamite pick. It's not going to happen year 1. People need to pump their brakes a little bit. Because Derek Carr is a really good quarterback. Spencer Rattler's got a long ways to go in terms of becoming a starter in the NFL. But can he do it? I don't know. Time will tell. But I think fans need to realize we have one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Is he Drew Brees? No. Not many guys are going to be Drew Brees. But he is a good enough quarterback to win the NFC South, get in the playoffs. And with this defense, heck, DeMario, Father Time keeps trying to knock at DeMario's door. He doesn't let it happen. He keeps playing this way. And you look at all the defensive backs we have. If we can get the things right in the offensive line and defensive line and control line of scrimmage, this team can win the NFC South.
Well, and Scott, again, people expect you to play hurt, especially in football. Basketball, I don't know. I mean, you might play, you might not, whatever. But in football,
you're almost damned if you do, damned if you don't, though.
But no,
right.
because if you look what happened, and that was significant when you look at the game. That's why all the games matter. When you're playing, 16, 17 games, they all count. Because when you look at tiebreakers, for instance, when we're going to play Dallas in week 2, you know why that head-to-head's important? I don't think Dallas is going to win the NFC East this year, but the wild card. What are you going to do with the tiebreaker head-to-head? Like what happened with Green Bay last year. Remember towards the latter part, and we winning 17-3. With 12 minutes left, and we lost that game. Then look, Jordan Love, how he got better. But the reason why I bring that up, part of the turnaround with Derek Carr was because in the back end of the season, his health improved.
Amen.
He had an AC joint sprain that he suffered in week 3 against the Packers. So now you playing hurt? If you don't play hurt, then you're not tough. And because when you go out there, whether you're 100% or not, you're going to be judged on your play. Not he's playing hurt. No. Did you win or lose, or what did you do? And so you're kind of behind the 8 ball. But you know why I acknowledge, and players, there's nothing wrong with playing hurt. Come on, man. They guarantee you $150 million. Man, you almost have to have your leg cut off there tonight. Go out there or something.
Yeah. And again, I think we're all spoiled by. We watched Drew Brees. How many times was he injured and he had things wrapped up but he still went out and threw for 300 yards. Everybody just thought, well, that's normal. You can be hurt and still play. Drew did it. again, we got to stop comparing everybody to one of the greatest to ever do it. But when, like, to your point, Derek didn't play well in some of those games, but I've had an AC joint. Those things are not fun, and I wasn't throwing a football. So he went out there and he tried to do the right thing. He said, "You're paying me all this money. I have to be the face of the team. I want to be a leader. I want to be out there in the huddle with my guys." And what you'd like to see in that situation is the rest of the team rally around that guy and say, "Man, we respect this guy's toughness." And I think that's what Derek was trying to do. And I have a lot of respect for guys that try to do that. And you just have to know as a player, am I helping the team or hurting the team? But I still think even though he was hurt, he was probably still the best option to be out there.
Yeah, so that's Scott Shanle, again, former Saints linebacker, Super Bowl champion. He's now, he works, I don't know what his title is for the team technically, but he does like their post game with Aaron Summers. And, one of the comments I saw on YouTube, and again, I posted this kind of clip on YouTube and it has like 250, 300 comments, and people get angry.
You definitely stir up some shit when you mention Derek Carr for Saints fans, for sure. Everyone's got their own take, and a lot of it is negative. Most of it is negative.
Well, so the thing to me is, it's like, what is he actually saying there? Like, take a step back and think about, like, there's so much angry reaction to that clip. What is he actually saying? He's saying, y'all, it wasn't that bad. Like, it's like, I think you might be being a little unreasonable. That's essentially what if you boil it down to one sentence, that's what he's saying. And the reaction is like, how dare you?
Now you're on the shit list too, Scott Shanle.
Well, and someone was like, oh, he's I think the abbreviation they used was FOS. And I was like, I'm not sure what that means, but I think it means front office shill would be my guess. Like front office shill. And I get why you'd say that. And we talked about this. Like, he does work for the team to some extent. So he is going to be softer in his takes than some others. But
he did mention, though, Carr deserves some criticism. There was some the
leadership parts of it, right?
Exactly. Kind of blowing up on the field, having a tantrum and all. He mentioned all that.
Yeah, and we talked about that too. Like, we had a whole episode where I was like, dude, you need to grow the fuck up and like stop being a bitch on the field. Like, you gotta stop. That's gotta stop, right? And to his credit, that didn't continue, right? Like, you look at the second half of that season. Can you think of moments where, past the Jaguars game, and maybe was there another one? Like, there was the Texans game, there was the Jaguars game where he's going at Chris Olave. I guess week 10, you could say like, oh, maybe he threw angry passes to Mike Thomas early in the game. Mike thinks it was that. But like, I don't think you saw like through the remainder of the season him kind of losing his. Eric McCoy, the Eric McCoy one, that was Panthers, and yeah, that was a thing. Final month of the season, you didn't really see that, and okay, things were going well for the most part. So yeah, you could say, hey, maybe there was some strides taken there, but like, I don't disagree. There's a lot to criticize from Derek Carr's first season. My issue is that we're not criticizing things that happened. It's get him out of here. He sucks. It's this guy can't win. You can't win with this guy. Does not matter. There's no nuance. There is no contextualizing that a 9-8 season in the NFL is not the worst thing that's ever happened. There's no contextualizing the idea that you were one blown lead that he was at a hospital for, away from being 10-7 and hosting a playoff game. There's no contextualizing that. There's no contextualizing that 3 9-8 teams made the playoffs. 3 teams with the same record made the playoffs. The Seahawks made the playoffs. They lost. The Packers made the playoffs. They beat the Cowboys. The Bucks made the playoffs. They beat the Eagles, right? It can't be all or nothing when you're talking about one bounce of a football, right? One missed kick, one ball tipping off a guy's hands. And that's the difference between having a good season or a bad season. You have to be able to look deeper than that. And that's my issue, is it's not about figuring out, okay, what went wrong in the beginning of the season? What went right at the end? And how can you replicate that second part and eliminate that first part? That's not part of the conversation for a lot of people. And I think Bobby said it was like 50-50. And Scott was like, I think it's less than 50-50. And I think he's right. I think it's more like 70-30. Get him the fuck out of here. And I don't know. Like, I do think there's a lot more to it than just what's happening on the football field. Like, there's so much animosity when it comes to that conversation.
I've heard a lot of people complaining about that he hasn't really endeared himself to the community enough.
I've complained about that. I agree with that.
We mentioned the Mardi Gras, not being around at all, but just more than that, it seems like he's still got more ties out west, and fans don't want to see that shit.
Yeah, I mean, he played for 10 years with the Raiders, so he's going to have more connections with that, area, with that fan base, and obviously two different areas, right?
I guess it is. I think he did being a Saint.
I think he did talk about the Mardi Gras thing on his Ask Me Anything on Instagram. He mentioned like it was rehab or whatever. I still would say, hey,
operate.
Yeah, figure it out. Find a way to be a part of.
There's plenty of them.
Yeah, I'd hope that that's something. And he has talked about that this offseason in terms of like more so the team. And I think that was an issue last year that kind of got swept under the rug that, I think Scott is referencing there in terms of the leadership aspect of like, yeah, you gotta find ways to commit to offseason programs with your teammates. And you've got to find ways to, I get it. You're moving, you're buying a house, you're relocating. That's tough. And it's something that a lot of people I think don't appreciate in terms of, when you change teams, you are changing a lot more than just the offense you're in. You're literally moving. You're literally uprooting your kids and your wife and all that and bringing them with you in most cases. And there's a lot of stress involved there, right? Especially when you've been with one team for 10 years. Now, some people handle it better than others. I don't know if Derek handled it as well as he could have. It sounds like he's putting an onus on fixing that this year. And he talked about that during the Zurich Classic. Like, he was like, anytime someone texts me, like, I'm there, right? Like, whatever it is, you want to play ping pong, you want to go out, go get pasta, you want to throw, I'm there. And, I think, there was a point last year where Alvin kind of talked about that. And he didn't mention Derek, but I think he was kind of sub-commenting Derek in that regard of like, sometimes you got to make sacrifices. This is a business. And so we'll see. But again, it's like, my issue is not that people are critical of Derek. They should be critical of Derek. He's getting paid as a star quarterback in the NFL, and he's got to deliver like one.
His salary is also, I feel like, a big deal for whatever reason, because when you look at other, QBs in the NFL, it's really reasonable.
We'll talk about that in a second. But like my issue is not that the conversation is Derek wasn't good enough in year one and he needs to improve here, he needs to improve here, he needs to improve here. My issue is that so many people don't seem interested in that conversation at all. Like, and I don't get it. Like, it's like, you've given up on this next season already. Okay, then what's the point? Then why are we here at all?
He even finished strong, dude. He had 14 touchdowns, 2 picks in the last 6 games. Come on.
But it was all against bad teams. It was all garbage time stats, right?
Garbage time, right, yeah.
Going to Tampa, the division champion in week 17, a game that they could have clinched the division at home and kind of taken them apart. Garbage time. The team sucked, right? Division beating up on the Falcons in week 18. It doesn't matter. Garbage time division. They sucked. Giants had won 3 games before they faced the Saints. It doesn't matter. They sucked. It is what it is. But like, I think that's what Scott is getting at. It's not like you have to love Derek Carr. I don't care if you like Derek Carr.
But give him credit when he deserves it.
Well, I mean, think about it in ways that are beyond like, I hate this guy. I'm going to come up with 3 reasons that he shouldn't be the quarterback. And then that's the end of the conversation. I don't know. That's all I want, because otherwise you're just having the same conversation over again. Isn't that boring? Isn't that boring for people? One topic that I'm tired of talking about, and you brought it up, and I feel like I'm on crazy pills because I keep saying the same thing over and over again. People saying like, oh, no one in the world would have ever paid this guy what the Saints did. And like, I get why you say that. And like, you look at it and say 4 years, 100 and whatever million, like it's just a crazy number that no normal person that is not making that amount of money could ever even comprehend. And I get that, but that'd be true if he was making $3 million a year. But like, what does that number even mean? Like, I don't even know how I would live my life if I had that kind of money. But when you look at it in the scope of like someone commented on YouTube and was like, show me one other example of a guy who got paid that much money after 10 years of this and not winning a playoff game and whatever. And so my answer to that was basically like, hey, he is the 15th highest paid starting quarterback in the NFL right now.
Hello.
He's the 15th highest paid starting quarterback in the NFL. There are only 2 starting quarterbacks in the NFL that are not on a rookie deal, which kind of like, you can't compare those because
right.
Like a lot of these guys will be making more when they sign their second contract. Jordan Love, for example, he's on kind of it's not the 5th-year option, but it's essentially the 5th-year option that they just signed him to kind of a weird extension in advance. But it's still kind of his rookie contract. He's the only one that's kind of weird. But like a lot of guys are making more money than Derek. The only guys who aren't, that are not on a rookie deal, are Baker Mayfield, who's now making $33 million a year annually. Like his contract, like we talked last year about how they barely paid him, but he delivered on this much, right? He's now making $33 million a year. So you can't say that these guys are out of, like, Derek's making, I think, 37. Baker's making 33. The other guy, Geno Smith, he's in year 10. So he's making $25 million a year. Those are the two NFL quarterbacks that you would call starters that are making less. And someone's like, well, what about, well, who's making more? Okay. Deshaun Watson is making $46 million a year. He's let's see. I have the numbers here. I'm tired of saying them and just guessing.
It's really absurd though. Like if you really look at it, I mean, what the Saints were trying to do with this team and, you know, continuing on, not going through the rebuild. I don't even know if you want to call it a soft rebuild right now. I don't really feel it's that way. They're just trying to continue on with the team and the talent that they have, and felt that Derek Carr could be a plug and play guy.
Right. Okay, wait. So just to tie that off, Geno is 30-36, 0-1 in the playoffs. Daniel Jones, $40 million. Deshaun Watson, $46 million. This is average annual contract. Deshaun Watson's got like a fully guaranteed contract, guys. Daniel Jones, career record, 22-36-1. He's 1-1 in the playoffs. They made the playoffs 2 years ago. They beat the Vikings. They beat Kirk Cousins, the guy that everyone's like, oh, he certainly should be making $40 million a year. One career playoff win. Lost to Daniel Jones and the Giants after that great season they had. That was a home game for them. They lost. Kirk Cousins one win in his career in the playoffs. It happened against the Saints. So we can give him that. Deshaun Watson is 66-65 in his career, 1-2 in the playoffs. He's making $46 million a year. So, like, you can argue, yes, that Derek Carr they probably overpaid him by a handful of $1 million on that contract. You could probably have, in hindsight, signed him for what the Bucs signed Baker Mayfield, right? And you're looking at 33 instead of 37 million, something in that range. But again, that's right there. I mean, you're talking about, again, the median contract in the NFL in terms of quarterbacks, the middle of the road contract in the NFL. So, I mean, that's how much starting quarterbacks make in the NFL. So it's like, if you want to, and it's not about going back, oh, in 2006, no one was making, it's like, yeah, they didn't make as much money in 2006, but you don't need to go back and look at who's making $150 million. You need to go back and look at who was the 15th highest paid quarterback in 2006. So let's look. Let's see if I can find that. Let's see if it goes back that far. Let's see if Spot Rack has it. That's usually what I look for salary rankings.
Another thing, obviously, that stood out with, Scott Shanley's comments were the fact that Derek Carr is never going to be Drew Brees, and folks have to live with that.
Yeah, and I think that, like, a lot of people may not even realize. So there's a couple things. So there's the Derek Carr Drew Brees comparison, and that was never going to work out in Derek's favor. There's also, like, I think there's still people who are salty about how things went for Jameis Winston, right? And I understand that, but it's not Derek's fault that the team kind of did Jameis dirty in 2022 and never gave him his job back. So you can't hold that against the guy who's here now. All you can ask is that you do it. And so, okay, let's go back. So just to tie off that note on the contracts, we're talking about the 15th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So it's not about who's making what. It's about, okay, who was the 15th highest paid quarterback? 2011, Mark Sanchez. 2012, Aaron Rodgers, which is an interesting one. It might have been, he had 39 touchdowns, 8 interceptions that year. So that's an interesting one, Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, okay. So some of these years it's going to be, okay, pre-market reset. I'm sure he signed a massive contract after that. The highest paid quarterback in the league at that point, Drew Brees. Peyton Manning, $19.2 million. That was, I guess, another thing I hear is like, oh, they paid Derek Carr what they never paid Drew Brees. That was a year Drew Brees was the top paid quarterback in the NFL. All right, let's move on.
The dollar amounts, like you mentioned, the inflation happens, folks. It's what happened. It's dealing with the economy of the NFL or anywhere.
Right. The next season, Aaron Rodgers is the top paid quarterback in the NFL. So it cycles, right?
Yeah.
He's making $22 million, but that's how much it was in 2013. The 15th highest paid, Jay Cutler. He's sensing a trend here. 2014. Aaron Rodgers still the highest paid, the 15th highest quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. So this must have been right before a Ben Roethlisberger extension. And in 2015, yes, Ben Roethlisberger is up to the third highest paid quarterback. He's making $21.5 million. Alex Smith is the 15th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. 2016, you're talking about Colin freaking Kaepernick is the 15th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. 2017, Tom Brady. He's making $20 million, which is what Drew Brees was making in 2012 as the highest paid quarterback. Tom Brady is now making that as the 15th highest paid quarterback. He's right above Ryan Tannehill. And Tom Brady at this time was taking team friendly deals to help his team field a contract, or to help his team field, a better group around him. Right now we're up to 2018. Aaron Rodgers is making $33.5 million. The quarterback market has just exploded. And that's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. 15 is Cam Newton, making $20 million a year. And this is way past Cam is really kind of a star right now. Going back further, 15th highest paid quarterback in 2019, Nick Foles with the Jags. Okay. So, I mean, we could keep going, but you get the idea. Like the 15th highest paid quarterback, that's what probably Derek Carr is. He's in that range. So it's not like that's not the conversation we need to be having. Again, the conversation is what went wrong, what needs to be fixed, and how do you fix it? And I think the team understands that. That's why you changed offensive systems. That's why you fired all these people and brought in Clint Kubiak, brought in a new offensive line coach, brought in a new quarterbacks coach, right? Like you're trying to make those fixes. But
then it goes back to the other problem. Folks also hate the head coach. And which
yeah. I mean, I also think that, we didn't talk about that, but you're right. Like a lot of people view Derek as kind of an extension of Dennis Allen. And that for that reason alone, they will never get on board with Derek. And that I actually can understand a little more. Like that actually works for me. But I do think there's just a lot of intellectual dishonesty in this argument of like, I don't like Derek because I have good reasons. And it's not. It's like you decided that. And it has nothing that happens on the field is going to impact that whatsoever. And that's when I get frustrated. It's that like this idea that you're coming at this from a neutral perspective, and you've used that view as how you've got into this area of like, fuck this, fuck him, fuck you too.
Right.
And it's really, and it's just like, just be honest. Like you were never gonna be on board with this,
And it's like that mob mentality too, where everybody just latches onto it and it festers and grows even more.
There's a groupthink element happening. And yeah, I agree with that. And again, like I've been critical of Derek. I think there's a lot of good reasons to be critical of Derek. But it's frustrating to know that so many people are approaching this season as a lost season without it. Like if you can't be optimistic at this time of year,
you're doomed.
It's not about the team.
Right.
Because they're just doing what they can do and seeing what they can put out there.
Right. This is when hope should be springing eternal for everyone.
Right. And so all that is to say, like, I think like you can call Scott a front office shill if you want. I think he's on point with those comments. And so we can go from there. But that's it. That's ideally that's the last time I have to do this rant. I feel like I've done it like 3 different times.
Oh, it's going to happen in training camp the first day that Spencer Rattler has a 3-touchdown day, and folks are going to be losing their minds.
Well, that's another thing Scott talked about. It's like, hey, I like Spencer Rattler. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not. This is not me trashing Spencer Rattler, but like you are so anti Derek Carr that you've convinced yourself that a 5th-round pick is like the future franchise quarterback without ever seeing him on the field. Think about that. You think those two things are unrelated? They're not.
Well, what's crazy too is obviously, I mean, Rattler's still a DA guy.
I see. I think people feel like he's a Kubiak guy. like so many people have already gone past the Dennis Allen era, and they're like, I just want him to get fired midseason so they can put Clint Kubiak as the head coach, and we can go on from here.
Who even knows if he would end up becoming the head coach of the team?
Oh, I mean, nobody. I actually would be surprised if he would. But
Yeah, I would think maybe like a Rizzy even would have a chance.
Yeah. I don't know if I would. I think fans would hate that era too, if I'm being honest.
I'm saying like as the interim head coach till next year kind of thing. If everyone's wishes and hopes and dreams came true and DA got fired mid-season this year.
Yeah, special teams coaches are actually like low key a really good options to be that interim because they're rarely the guy that gets fired, right? And they deal with everybody on the team basically. Like everyone has interactions with him, whereas like the offensive coordinator only deals with the offense, so it can be tough to kind of jump in midstream and handle the defense with the way you have to as a coach, as a head coach. Whereas the special, like look at the Panthers last year,
right?
I can't remember the guy's name, Chris something or other.
Yeah, it escapes me right now too. But he did lose his job eventually.
So you're probably right. If they did fire DA mid-season, you probably would put Darren as the interim.
He's got a good tone to him and delivery, so I think he'd be, like hearing him deliver press conferences would be good.
His post-game press conferences would be so long, so long. You'd only get asked like 5 questions, and it would go on for like an hour.
That's enough, right?
But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to do something quick. We're going to just go over some schedule predictions. You got mine in depth, so I don't need to give you that again, but we're going to talk about Steve's. We're going to talk about Bobby's. And I want to talk about some of the games I'm excited to watch next year, and I'm interested to hear what you think. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Otherwise, we'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. One more segment here. We're not talking about OTAs anymore, although those do start on Tuesday. So our next episode this week will be breaking down what we saw out at OTAs. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the schedule. And we got a lot of it, right? We know there's 2 cold weather games. We know that the first 7 weeks, very difficult. We know that they have 3 games in 10 days between week 5, which is a Monday Night Football game against the Chiefs, and week 7, which is a Thursday Night Football game against Sean Payton and the Broncos. And before we get into anything, let's hear Cam talking about that matchup with the Broncos. And, I broke down the schedule and I was like, hey, this is going to be a much easier game for the Saints to get excited for in a short week than it will be for the Broncos players. And this is kind of why I feel that way.
Speaking of speculation, could we ask you about the game on October 17th? What is it going to be like to see Sean wearing a different visor?
Is that the 7:00 p.m.
Yes.
Thursday night game?
Yes.
Not that.
How weird is that going to be just to see him on a different sideline for a guy who coached you pretty much your entire career?
It's fun. Yeah, it's fun. It's like I said, it's not that I've like circled it on a calendar or like marked it down that we have to win that game, but it feels like we have to win that game. Everybody knows who Sean Payton is. We can't let him. Can't let him do that one.
But yeah, like that's going to be the sentiment. So you're going to have to, like, it's hard. It's difficult. If I'm a team that's going into a short week and playing a Thursday night game, you kind of want that motivation because it's tough. It's tough to turn around and play that game on a Thursday. And if it's a meaningless game against, a 2-15 team, that's the type of game that's like, I wouldn't be surprised if you lose it because it's just really tough to get emotionally back into it. The Saints aren't going to have any problem getting emotionally ready for that game on Thursday night in week 7. So I actually think that's like, in terms of what game did you have to have there for that Thursday night game? I think that's actually a win for them. Like, what do you think?
Thank you, NFL, for definitely putting this in a primetime game. It deserves to have the grand exposure to everyone. I know everyone's eagerly anticipating, like Saints fans, that Sean Payton return to New Orleans in the Superdome. You talk about the sound level that night. I'm sure it is going to be one of those deafening, ear-rocking evenings in the Dome.
What do you think the crowd is going to be like for that game? Because I'm not sure. Like, I feel like if you go into that game and you're like, well, so like 2-4, I want to say that, like, I feel like the reaction is going to be different than if you're like 4-2 and you can be like kind of like, oh, bless your heart, kind of like cheer, right?
It's tough because I know obviously people appreciate and love what Sean did while he was here and what that swag and attitude he kind of brought. But there are a lot of folks that feel he kind of left everybody high and dry and, took a year off and is now back in the NFL. So I don't know if they give the cheers or the boos.
I think Do you blame him for DA? Do you blame him for like what's
That's
happened
another
since?
one.
Because like if you do, then you should boo. If you're mad about DA and Derek and you're booing them, then you should boo Sean because he's the reason they're the coach. He's the reason Dennis Allen is the coach. If Sean
and then he left his spy behind, Pete Carmichael. He brought with him back to Denver.
Well, like Jameis was the quote. I had someone say like, "Oh, the organization never gave Jameis a fair shot," and I'd be like, "I disagree. I don't think it was the organization's fault. I think that's Sean's fault because Sean brought him in. Sean said, "Hey, we're gonna train you to be the next quarterback. You're gonna have you learn behind Drew, and we're gonna get you in there." He got 7 games, and he got hurt, and then Sean bailed. And like you can say, "Well, DA did him dirty and whatever." It's like, sure, you're right. But at the same time, I also think that a head coach has the right to choose his quarterback.
Yeah.
And he never picked Jameis in the first place for that role. It just kind of got delivered to him. And there was they tried to get Deshaun Watson. Like you saw from day one that they were not committed to Jameis. And again, like I do feel for Jameis. I think he got put in a really difficult situation. But like Sean is the architect of that situation. And,
And Dennis was just left picking up the pieces.
Yeah, and Dennis, when it comes to dealing with people, he's terrible. I don't think he has feelings and emotions like a normal person. I think it's just a robot. So he didn't handle it well, and it was never going to be handled well. But I think people should be mad at Sean. Like I don't think this is a situation where he should come back and everyone would be like, "Thank you so much for everything." Which if you handle things a certain way, yes. But I think this is similar to Anthony Davis. If I'm being real, you're all mad.
You're the enemy now. You left us, right?
The only difference is Sean won and AD didn't. Sean was also here a little bit longer. Sean helped kind of deliver everything from the darkness that was Katrina, right? And so you will be thankful for that. But in terms of how he left, in terms of how he kind of said F y'all and got out the way, similar, right? So I don't know. And you could also thank both of them because they left in such a way that actually got you assets back. So that was nice of them, I guess. But I did take one more question and then we'll get to your predictions.
Yeah.
Do you play a tribute video? Like a thank you video?
I don't think so. Because that should get cheers, obviously, with the Super Bowl highlights. I don't think you do. I think, you got to move on. And as much as Sean has done, and I know he's tight with Mickey, and it's like, we've given you your flowers before. I don't know if they do that on a Thursday night game, honestly.
I think you make a tribute video, you post it on Twitter, a thank you video.
That's fair.
You post it on Twitter, but you do not play it in the stadium on game day because I want that stadium to be hostile.
Yes.
Right? Agreed. And if I start things off, because you would have to play it in the pregame, you're not playing it mid-game. If you start things off with that kind of amicable energy, you're not going to get that kind of hostile energy throughout the game. So that's what I would do. Because I do think that you have to be gracious in some way.
Good point.
And I think putting it on social media, you can say, "Hey, we did it."
Right.
But I'm not giving him, because I think that's an advantage to him and his team if you create that kind of groundswell of emotional baggage that would be coming in with that video. Because I want the players to be in a certain headspace. I want the fans to be in a certain headspace. And I want his life to be miserable during that game.
And it'll be interesting to see because who the hell knows what the Denver quarterback situation is going to be like then.
Yeah, and I want Bo Nix to fear for his life if he's starting that game. Anyway, okay, let's kind of get into it. So my schedule prediction, I kind of went off the wall. I started them starting 1-3. I think 1-3. Yeah, 1-3, then winning 5 in a row, then losing 3, and then getting to 10-7. Right? It's a roller coaster. It's miserable the whole way. There's going to be booze. There's going to be yeah, but they find a way to 10-7 and go from there. I just think that's kind of where you're at. But there's the margin's so narrow. Mike Detillier had him at 8 and 9. The difference really, we all kind of me, Mike, Bobby, we all kind of have the same feeling of hey, you're gonna have a rough start. I think we all have them starting 1-3 or 1-4. The difference I have from Mike is I have them beating the Chiefs and kind of upsetting them in that matchup, and then I have them going on the road and beating the Chargers, a team that I don't feel like Mike's giving them a lot more credit than I am in terms of being ready to win with no playmakers on offense other than.
But Harbaugh's back in the NFL here now.
Yeah, well, it's like, they're going to run the ball. Yeah, but they're going to run the ball with Gus Edwards. So
right. I'm not that impressed either with what the Chargers bring to the table. They have a pretty stout defense. We'll see how that plays out. But offensively, who's Herbert throwing to even too?
Well, exactly. Like, I think you need one more good draft and then you're ready. I just don't know if like they could win that game. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not gonna chalk it up as like, the Chargers. The Saints.
Right. I'm not. Oh, you got to go out west. That does suck, but it's not. Is it a short week? That
they've played in that building so many times.
Oh no! So they go from Thursday night to Sunday night football.
Yeah,
so
and they get extra rest on that. Like the last time you went out west, you were on a short week. This time you're going to be on the super week because it's 10 days anyway. So that's the difference. Like that's the difference between 8 and 9 and 10 and 7. But yeah, I think Bobby's prediction was a little tougher to kind of wrangle in terms of how he got through it. I think he had him at 9 and 8, but it's tough to say. And that opening stretch, right? If the Saints can get through it at 2 and 2, then I think you're in real good shape. If you're going out at 1 and 3 or 0 and 4, which you would have to lose to the Panthers in week 1, then you're in serious trouble. But where do you land on kind of that opening stretch first of all, and then your overall schedule predictions?
Yeah, you mentioned with Abear, I do recall he's like, if we're above 500 after 5 games, we're going to the freaking playoffs.
I think he said like 8 games. I think he's like, if you're 4 and 4 or 5 and 3 after 8 games, you're a playoff team.
For me, honestly, I'm right in that range. I could see 8, 9, 10, and so I'm right in the middle right there now with the 9-win season. I need to see more, obviously, during training camp from the offensive line. That is my biggest question with this squad is what are we going to get up front, protecting Derek Carr and also providing any kind of blocking for that run game, which I felt has really struggled the last 2 years. And that's why the additions of Benton on the offensive line, Kubiak as offensive coordinator, there should be a lot of excitement going into this year to see what kind of changes can come about. And I'm gonna err on the side of, it's going to be positive, or at least I'm definitely hoping that, considering what we had to deal with the last couple of years of what felt like a stale Pete Carmichael offense here. It was time for the upgrade. We'll see what happens, obviously, with him teaming up with Sean, if Wonder Twin powers unite, whatever. But with this squad, with New Orleans, they've got the pieces all around Derek Carr with weapons on offense. I'm just worried about the protection around him. In defense, DA's been doing it, so I'm not really worried there, except for the age of some of your prime time leaders, like on all levels. Like Cam Jordan, obviously, we'll see if the ageless wonder of DeMario Davis can continue on, and then obviously a guy in the secondary and Tyrann Mathieu up there in age.
Yeah, but so what's your?
I'm at a 9-win season right now. Like I said, I need to see more in camp before. I'm not scared of going to that 10-win mark. I would take the over on this team with Las Vegas. I know the odds makers have them at 7.5 wins for the year. And to me, even when that first came out, I thought it was ludicrous.
Yeah, 7.5. It's like, okay, you could say they shouldn't be higher than last year, but to give them 2 games, like they had them at 9.5 last year, right?
Yeah.
And they won 9 games.
Right.
So like what's changed? Like
you've lost Pete Carmichael.
Right. I would argue that's an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
So what exactly? I mean, I guess like they're looking at the Falcons and saying the Falcons are going to run a roughshod over the division. I think that's a mistake.
What's funny too is because the Saints weren't big spenders and were hampered by the salary cap over their heads for another season and didn't really add that much this off season in free agency, was a huge negative I felt with a lot of folks. And I disagree. We'll see what happens, obviously, with Chase Young. Definitely interested to see what the new linebacker they got from Kansas City brings in as well.
Yeah, I don't know. 7.5 just seems like, okay. Like, it's like, and to be fair, it's not Vegas. It's just, they're just playing public sentiment, right? Like they're setting it at a line that they want to make money on.
They're pretty damn good with them. Like you mentioned, the year last year, they had them at 9.5. They finished with 9.
Well, I mean, Vegas, you're going into this, like the reason it's at 7.5 is because they know with the public sentiment around the Saints being what it is, and you see, power rankings with them in like 28th, and people are going to want to bet the under. on the Saints win total. And if you set it at 8.5, people are going to hammer the under because they're like 8 wins. Okay, fine. Whereas if you set it at 7.5, you're going to see a lot more people betting the over, and it's going to be more. Your Vegas, you just don't want to you don't want to set it where so much money is on one side that you lose when that hits. You want to get as close to 50-50 as possible on these because you're inevitably going to win on like parlays and stuff like that. So that's why you're there. So they're not really analyzing the teams. They're analyzing the betting patterns. But anyway, but no, I think you're right. And I this is my immediate gut check. Okay, I'm going to go here with this schedule. But once we watch camp and we get a better picture, once we get through the preseason,
even then things are deceiving. Obviously, we were hyping up Juwan Johnson last year in camp, and look what happened.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I imagine you're going to see more than one series of Derek Carr in the preseason.
Right, just to see his hold on new offense.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to almost. I would, unless they're going to use those joint practices with the Niners for more of that work. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. They do have the joint practices, and that's a big part of it. Either way, all right, let's wrap that up. Another episode in the books. We'll be back at you later in the week, probably post Thursday morning, maybe Wednesday evening, based on when we can get it done with OTA takeaways, OTA number 1. We'll take attendance. We'll do all that good stuff. But all right, we went through a lot today. Appreciate everyone hanging in. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow him at Steve Geller WWL. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. And obviously check out the latest on WWL.com. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Leave a rating, leave a review at wherever you get your podcasts or on WWL Sports on YouTube. Ring the bell, all that good stuff. You ready, Steve? You ready to stand out in the sun?
I am ready. I mean, we had a little taste during rookie mini camp, and it wasn't so bad. We'll see. I know it's expected to be a lot warmer a couple weeks later now.
It's so hot. It's so hot. It was so nice.
Our towels, our hats, we'll be good.
Yeah, it was so nice during rookie minicamp. It's going to be a scorcher on Tuesday. I'm not.
It was a tease, right?
I need to go get a new cooling towel.
Definitely. That is a mandatory for camp anytime.
But all right, y'all. Thanks everyone. If you made it to the end, you're a trooper, and I appreciate you. Who dat? Go Saints.
Appreciate you, Who Dats. Thank you.
Peace, y'all. Peace.